Reams. Because our pronunciation was Reams, and so then they all jumped up again. But I was in staging in Rheims, and then going to Marseille to go to the Pacific by way of the Suez Canal. So they signed me out of the European theater. And then I was sort of in limbo until I got to report to the Pacific. I don't know where I was going. We never knew. And en route to Marseille, the children began running along the trains, seemed to say, c'est fini, the guerre c'est fini. And so we figured something had happened. And when they met us at the train in Marseille saying that Japan had surrendered.
Oh,
and so then we were sent back into the Army of Occupation in Germany. And not to the Pacific. And we went Rheinau, which is a little village between, well, it's where General Patton, I was there. We took care of General Patton when he was wounded.
Oh, is that?
He was in the hospital in Heidelberg. They called us. They were sent into our hospital, which was a VAC hospital outside of Mannheim, between Mannheim and Heidelberg. And they called and said that they were sending that General Patton had been wounded. Well, he was on his way to Schloss Ludwigsberg, where I had just been for the weekend before. And they told me to come on back the next weekend, that General Patton was coming up for the pheasant hunting. And Colonel Stoddard was in charge of that unit. And I couldn't go back then. I'd had my weekend. So then the following Saturday, they called us and said that General Patton had just been in an automobile accident, and they were sending him to our hospital. We said, "Oh, don't," because that road was bombed out completely. And if he'd had a back injury and had come over that, and we said, if you were on the Autobahn, my chief nurse was talking to him, and I was with her, and she said, if you're on the Autobahn, just a few miles further, you're in Heidelberg to a big general hospital. So they went on there. And then we gave our Red Cross quarters to Mrs. Patton, who flew her over. And then my chief nurse was a Roman Catholic, and General Guthrie was a Roman Catholic, and the Pattons were. So they called them to come and make the funeral arrangements when he died.
Oh, is that right?
And so we took care of his Patton while we were doing that.
So,
but anyway, that's where I was in the Army occupation, was right outside of Heidelberg, between Heidelberg and Mannheim.
Well, that's so interesting. We went down to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and saw they have a memorial. His field office and the car he was killed in. All that.
He really was. He was a wonderful person.
And we had such a good trip. That was kind of the highlight of our trip, was seeing.
But he was criticized so much for his slapping that soldier.
Right.
Well, I knew a nurse who had been on duty in that hospital where that happened, and he had been going down between the cots in the ward. Most of them were dying. And she said that he was going and kneeling beside each bed and reading the prayer for the dying from his prayer book, and turned, and he was so upset because so many of these boys were dying. And then this boy, who was, and I don't know whether it was made public, was publicized at all, but he had a self-inflicted wound. He had got he was so upset and so near to being neuropsychiatric, he shot his foot from fright. I mean, to get out of the service. And then he went to pieces and started ranting and raving. And here were all these boys dying. And Patton just turned and stopped and said, "Shut up, you don't know what you're talking about," and said that Patton was under such pressure. And he got up from his knees from praying for a boy that was dying and had this boy pitch into him, and he just slapped him. I think I would have too.
Well, he was criticized. It was in all the papers and that sort of thing.
But the soldiers loved him dearly.
Under the circumstance, but it wasn't an uncommon thing for, if a patient was hysterical, a person is hysterical,
throw a glass of water in the face or slap him.
Yeah, many people have, and but he being a general, and of course when you get, I'm not down on the news media, but sometimes when things get in the newspaper, it gets a little distorted, doesn't it?
Well, yes, but then he had so much criticism, and they were used to criticizing Patton rather than praising him. And
Well, he must have been interesting.
he kind of asked for it.
How about his wife? Was she a pleasant
Perfectly
somebody?
darling.
It was a,
She was a lovely person. We had her in the club for drinks before dinner most every night. And when we flew her over, and she was just a perfectly charming, delightful person. We enjoyed taking care of her.
Did you meet any other, maybe not famous people then, but have become famous or well known?
Well, I don't know. Well, the only time I ever saw Eisenhower was in Reims, and he was out taking an early morning walk, and I was out not enjoying an early morning walk. I just had to get from one place to another in a hurry early. And this man said, "Hi, Red Cross." And I said, "Hi, soldier." Then I looked at him and I said, "Sir." That's the, I don't know. There were a lot of them. I met a lot of them in Paris on the first on Bastille Day, the evening of Bastille Day, the first one that the French had been able to celebrate since the German invasion. And they had a big ball at the Opera for the French, and we know for all of them. And the colonel I was with that evening said, "Come on, let's go." And we sailed up. I think we were the only sober people in Paris that night. The French were certainly all drunk because it was their first Bastille. That's their 4th of July and everything else all rolled in together. And there were a lot of them there that we met, but I don't remember there. I don't remember. And more they remembered me.
As difficult as it was, I imagine it was a very interesting time too, trying to stay ahead of things and trying to keep alive and trying to keep other people alive and happy.
All we did was try to keep out of trouble.
Your background in nursing certainly was a head start for you, wasn't it?
Oh yes, it really was. It made it much easier for me.
It would have been very difficult for a person not to have had any experience with the medical profession.
There was supposed to be a person who had medical or medical social work background in those hospital units, so that they had some idea what they were doing.
I imagine it was so sad to see the boys far away from home and so sick, wasn't it?
Yes, and to be writing letters for them. Well, I walked up through the woods many a night, the chaplain and I. The Roman Catholic chaplain was perfectly marvelous. The other one fainted every time he saw blood in me. I don't know what he was doing in the hospital unit. He spent more time in the hospital as a patient than he did as a chaplain.
Kept him busy.
But the Roman Catholic chaplain was simply marvelous. And when I would be on late at night, way on into the night, getting the letters written and doing the things that they needed done for them, he'd wait outside the wards to see that I got back up to the nurses' quarters, to the women's quarters safely. But when you try to write a letter for a boy who's had half his face blown away, and you know he's going to be blind, he'll never see him. He's had a baby born since he went overseas, and he's got a baby at home he'll never see, and you're having to write his family and tell him. It ain't easy.
Oh.
No, it's pretty awful.
Oh my. Well, the only way you could get through it, I guess, is to realize you were doing something for somebody to help them.
The way you got through it was think about it as little as possible.
And move on.
And go on to the next one. Oh, but the boys were so cute and funny. This Protestant chaplain reminds me of it. Now, this was an unusual case. Most of the Protestant chaplains were just as good as any. They were all good. Some of the Roman Catholic ones weren't much good. But it was just like any large group. You know, there's some good ones and some that are not so good. But there was a boy who had lost his eye, and he was in a wheelchair out on the ramp. See, the wards are all built separate, and then they're connected by ramps because of fire and bombing and that sort of thing. So if it hits one, it won't hit them all. And our mess officer was Sidney Kalmanowitz from New York. His father had a big chain of restaurants, and he owned the Russian tea room later. Came down here to stay with me one spring. But Captain Kalmanowitz met this boy. They were all the whole group of them on the ramp talking, and the chaplain came along and I was talking to them, and they said, somebody said, "Hey, where'd you lose your eye?" Something came up about your eye, and oh no, the chaplain wanted to know if he had a Zippo lighter, and the boss said, "No, I lost my Zippo lighter, but I'll tell you where you can find it." He said, "It's right up that front at such and such foxhole, right where I lost my eye. It's right up there. I lost it right up there where I lost my eye. If you want to go up there, you can have it." You couldn't get them down. They were and they'd have races up on the ramp in their wheelchairs. You just had to. You just couldn't do a thing with them. Paratroopers came down and kicked my door in.
Oh my!
One day they were used to. That's the way they opened the door.
Oh.
And there was a yard crew out there. When he kicked the door, it wasn't time to open the rec hall, and they stood out there and yelled and hollered. And he kicked the door 2-3 times, and it was just about to kick. It was sagging, and so I opened it. I don't remember what I said to him, but the yard crew outside said it was pretty good. They finally said, "Yes, ma'am," and saluted and went back to their ward until time to open. But they were under pressure, and they had on their paratroop boots, and they'd go into a village, and they didn't dare. They had their guns and things. All they could do was kick the door open and see whether somebody. But they didn't get very far in kicking my Red Cross office door open.
Oh my! Well, that's very interesting.
Well, now we've gone into all of this. We haven't said a thing about the lodge.
Now let's get back to Ashe County. Now, while I understand why you were being bombed out of your bed, did you worry about a bomb hitting you?
No, you don't about yourself.
Well,
if I'd been back here and somebody else was there, I'd been worried.
You've been worried about it.
It's never going to happen to you.
But there you were making plans to come to, of all places, Ashe County.
Yes, but see, I already own this land, and I decided I didn't want to go back to Washington for another 15 years and sit at a desk. And besides which, I wanted a place that I thought was thoroughly unbum-worthy. And Washington was not unbum-worthy. So...
Bomb or bum?
No, we said bum.
Maybe bomb and bum. Okay.
Well, bomb-worthy, but we just, I don't know, they always just said bums.
Well, that's what the word was. Yeah. I was just throwing in about Ashe County. We think of bums in the city, and
yes.
no bums maybe in Ashe
Well, this
County.
is bum with a B.
Yeah, right. So you were you're dreaming about coming back to Ashe County.
Yes.
And it was rather remote when you...
Oh, yes.
Yes, but that's what you wanted.
Well, I had the land.
You had the land.
And I thought if I could figure any way in the world to make a living. But working for radiologists, and there wasn't a radiologist up here, and that was all I knew.
Did we have a hospital then?
Well, it was the Ashe Memorial, but we didn't have an x-ray department.
Right.
We didn't have any radiologists. And that was all I knew was, I was, they called it auditor, which is purchasing agent and all for the 8 hospitals in Washington. You see, we had the x-ray departments and all the Garfield Emergency, Georgetown, Children's, Episcopal, and doctors, and our clinic in the medical day. So I spent all the money. I bought everything and paid the salaries and all that, but just the bookwork, I never saw the money, I just spent it.
Well, you were used to managing monies then, so you naturally would think about
I was used to spending it.
How were you going to make a living in Ashe County?
That's right.
And did you come directly, was that your plans to come?
I wanted to come directly. See, my house in Fairfax County, Virginia, was rented to an officer in the naval officer, and he was essential, but once I got out of the service, I wasn't. And so with rent control, I couldn't take my house back.
You couldn't take your house.
So I went to Mobiles in Raleigh, and then couldn't get a building permit to do anything up here. So I went with the Raleigh Community Chest and Council. I was executive secretary for the council and assistant to the one for the chest. And I said, well, I'll stay 1 year or until I can get a building permit. And it was about 10, 11 months. And I finally wangled a building permit. And about 2 days later, they lifted the restrictions, so I didn't need that building permit.
Well, when you came to Ashe County and decided, or when you bought your land...
Well, I bought it way back in the early 30s.
You bought your land in the early 30s. Were you thinking of a retirement home?
Well,
when
I had a lot of ideas. First, I thought I'd open a girls' camp until I found out what that involved, and then there were plenty of girls' camps. And I said, well, it's the grown people that need a place to go. And so I thought, well, I'll just run a boarding house. But I lived here for a year before I did anything, getting this first part built.
Now, let's talk about this first part.
Okay.
It's a log.
Yes, it's made of walnut and cherry logs.
Walnut and cherry logs. And when was it
well,
built?
It was built when I bought it. It was down on the river. It was the old Stewart place, and it had been there for 175 years.
For 100.
We know it had been there 175
which
years.
Stewart? What was the?
Well, she was a Barker.
Barker.
Mrs. Stewart was a Barker, and Colonel Fletcher's either aunt or great aunt. I think she was his great aunt. But so he had known the house, and he knew how long it had been there. When Mr. Stump tore it down and moved the logs up here, he found notchings in the logs that indicated some of them were second-hand.
Oh, really?
They had torn down some old building to use some of the logs. So we don't know how old they are, but we know that the building itself had been there 175 years, and that was 35 years ago. So you see, it's over 200.
Over 200 years those logs are. So that it probably was our pioneer settlers.
Yes.
Undoubtedly.
Mm-hmm. And of course, it was not sealed inside. It was the logs, and it was chinked and daubed with clay. And when we moved it, we chinked it with split poplar right off the mountain here, into wedges, and daubed it with cement. But they didn't have that back then, so it was chinked with, I don't know what, some kind of wood, and then daubed with clay.
Well,
now all that time.
You just gave me a delightful tour of your home. What is the size of the two original rooms that you had?
I think what is now the living room was about 18 by 20. Well, no, the outside measurements would have been about that, but then you see we insulated it and sealed it, which took a good bit off. But and the other one is slightly not quite as long. It's the same width, because what they did was they built the first house, the room, a dog trot, and the cookhouse, and then they had the attic for where the children, as they came along, could stay. Then, as the family grew, they doubled the size, so there were double log walls between. But we had to Mr. Stump cut them out, leaving the ends to do that. But he cut this off and nailed and put planks to nail them so that I wouldn't have 20-inch walls between the two rooms. You see, right. And so that it cut it down. You can see inside where the logs end. But we found there was they're about 20 by 20 and 20, because there was one 40-foot black walnut log that held the two together. And it was perfectly good. It was intact, and that's the top log outside in the front. But that's a 40-foot black walnut log that holds the two rooms together.
Is that that 140-foot log has seen a lot of
it certainly has.
happiness.
And I think they had to replace only two logs. There's one in there, and they're poplar. We cut off the mountain. There's one in the dining room here, and I believe there's one short one outside somewhere. But other than that, the logs were all perfectly good.
Well, when you first bought it, you said after you were ready to move in. Now, in the back of your mind, you were thinking
how to make a living.
How to make a living. What am I going to do now?
The only thing I knew I really wanted to do was to keep house and garden and have company. I didn't want to live up here all the time right by myself. So I thought, well, there was only Black Bear Inn, Healing Springs, and Chattel Springs. Now, they were the only places to stay, and the only places you could eat, and that only from about the 4th of July to Labor Day.
It's a seasonal thing.
So I thought, well, if I take a few and they stay with me, I'll have to feed them, because there wasn't any place. Even Graybeard's drugstore, you couldn't get a sandwich on Sunday.
True.
You see, and there wasn't a place closer than Winston to get even people just driving up here for the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
The only place to eat, except from the 4th of July to Labor Day. And then they were so crowded they couldn't. So, if I bet them, I'd have to board them because there's no place for them to go
Didn't
to
have
eat.
a choice, did you?
No, I had no choice. And the dining room, of course, is what limited the number of people I could have. Because if they couldn't get in the dining room, there's no point in building more space for them in the cabin.